In this quick start video, we will walk through the policy screens provided by the web administration interface of the Forum Sentry product. When you install Forum Sentry, you can then access the web admin interface via the configured port and IP address of the target Sentry instance. The login page as presented here is configurable from the Preferences screen with settings, such as the message that can be displayed and the color scheme of the interface. Let's go ahead and enter our administrative user to log into the web admin interface. The login credentials entered will be checked against the configured roles that are set up for the Sentry instance and present the policy options on the panel based on the rights of the user for the administration roles that have been associated. For the purpose of this demonstration, we are using an administrator that has access to all policies, both read and write. The policy interface is broken down into several different components, which represent the various system and policy level settings. Many of the component policies are reusable and are provisioned separately and then associated with the main content policies. We'll start by looking at the section called Diagnostics. Under this section is a monitoring section that can show various aspects of the current Sentry instance running, such as CPU utilization, memory utilization, and if there are database policies in use or network policies, then their utilization statistics will be shown. Here also is the licensing information, which will show the current enabled license features for this target instance of Sentry. The performance screen shows a breakdown across different statistics, including load, throughput, latency, and connections, where more detailed information can be seen by drilling down into more detail at a policy level and the granularity set to the last minute, 5 minutes, hour, or day. There is a built-in Google Analytics plugin to provide analytics to Google. The statistics screen shows simple counters for aspects of various task processing. The monitoring screen shows statistics at a granular level of operations and services, with drill down into more detailed statistics. The SNMP screen is for configuring access to SNMP ITO centralized statistical information, and the MIBs that are published are provided as links on this screen, which can then be published into your SNMP system for querying the Sentry instance for health and statistics, as well as the ability to set SNMP traps for alerts. JMNX remote screen is for JMNX monitoring. The catch meter screen is where you can see the utilization of hits and misses in the catches, as well as the catch keys and policies if you have configured API caching capabilities. Under the logging section, the data sources screen is where you can configure access connectivity to databases of various types for storage of information or retrieval of information from databases. The internal logs screen is for viewing logs. The audit logs are the administrative logs. All administrative activity from login to logout and all the activity in between are all captured in the audit log. The system logs are the runtime logs that provides configurable information about runtime transactions flowing through Sentry policies. The logging settings screen provide granular settings for what type of logging to be performed for the audit log administrative activities, as well as the runtime activities and other characteristics, such as the size of the logs as well as backup policies to back up logging to external sources. Event logging can be set up for specific events that may be triggered based on specified criteria, where events can be isolated in their own separate logging area in order to isolate and diagnose specific runtime conditions. The packet capture screen allows you to perform packet captures from the system in Wireshark CAP format. The remote syslog screen enables you to create different policies for writing and aggregating log information to central syslog destinations. These log levels are configurable, as well as the type of protocol and type of format for the logs that are being sent. That's the end of the Diagnostics Policies section. Next, we will move to the Gateway section, where we define network and content policies to handle runtime traffic. The Network Policies screen is where you will go to configure the input and output policies that enable information to flow into Sentry and out of Sentry. There are various protocol variants supported which can be configured here as a listener, or inbound policy and remote, or outbound policy. These policies are the network plumbing that enable Sentry to connect and process inbound and outbound traffic flows. These listener and remote policies can be mixed if you choose, where you can have an inbound listener of one protocol type and an outbound remote policy of a different protocol type, and Sentry will automatically mix the protocols for you. Group remote and group listener policies allow for grouping network policies. For listener policies, this enables multiple input channels to be associated with content policies. For group remote policies, you can have failover strategies or load balancing strategies, such as round robin and other types of group remote strategies. If there's a proxy communication required, you can set up proxy settings under the Proxy Policies screen. The Cache Policies screen is for defining caching characteristics for API response caching. Settings such as cache timeouts, the type of information, content types and methods that you want to configure for caching purposes. API caching can utilize Redis for distributed caching. The Redis Policies screen is where connections to Redis caching servers can be provisioned. The Content Policies section is a key focal point of Sentry policies, as there are where you define the information flows to enable Sentry to process. WSDL policies are for SOAP messaging, where you can bring in WSDL document and auto-build policies. Similarly, the Open API policies is for Open API scenarios and load an Open API document to auto-build policies. The XML policies screen is for defining custom variants of XML processing. The content policies associate with a listener and remote policy and various other settings, including the virtual directory, request and response task processing. SSO settings can be configured for the policies. The IDP Rules tab is for associating intrusion detection rules. The Logging tab is for policy-based logging that can be overridden at the policy level for more granular policy level settings. The REST policies, JSON policies, and HTML policies are similar to XML policies, with the settings configured to accept those types of messages. The Scheduler screen is for setting up testing schedules for initiating messages directly from Sentry. The Test Policies screen is policies that can be used to generate messages and invoke policies directly from Sentry. There are two built-in identity providers: SAML STS Identity Provider that enables you to host SAML token services, or an OAuth identity provider for OAuth token server capabilities. The Task Policies section shows task list groups for logical grouping of task lists. The Task List screen is where to configure the types of processing to be performed on the request or response. There are a myriad of built-in processing task capabilities, from mediation to mapping, conditional processing, user authentication, flow control, validation and conformance, manual logging and archiving, generating or consuming user credentials, and security processing like encryption and decryption, signing and verification, or scanning for viruses. The task lists are highly flexible and extensible to achieve virtually any type of processing on inbound or outbound data. The Redirect Policy screen is for creating redirect scenarios, often used for login or single sign-on scenarios. The Request Filters screen defines the content type and the types of data allowed to a content policy. So, for example, if you have a set of messaging variants that you want to allow through a content policy such as XML, JSON, SOAP, you can define these settings here. This is the end of the Gateway section. Now we will review the Resources section. Under the PKI topic, the Keys policies are where you will manage all of your PKI keying information. Under this section you can generate keys, import keys for various usages such as TLS, termination, TLS initiation, message encryption, message decryption, and so forth. The Signer Group section is how to define the intermediate and root certificate chains for certificate authentication. The CRO screen is for certificate revocation lists, which can be associated with the Signer Group policies when authenticating certificates. The SSA key screen is for defining SSA keys for the CLI and for FTP/PGP encryption. The SSL policy screen is for TLS initiation and TLS termination and settings, such as the TLS version and specific ciphers that you want to allow. The encryption policies are for defining encryption scenarios and algorithm settings. The decryption policies is for the decryption settings, such as algorithms and keys. The signing policies are for digital signature settings with various signature algorithms and digest algorithms for signing. Note that all of these policies support both asymmetric and symmetric keys. The backup policies are for setting a backup location for policy backup to an FTP server backup location or backing up to Amazon or database, or an SFTP server. This will then tell Sentry to store your configurations and automatically having them being backed up per the specified schedule. The Documents screen is for defining or importing sample documents that you can use to provision tasks lists. The Error Templates screen defines a response template that can be associated with a listener policy or content policy to ensure all error responses are normalized and formatted to specific templates for consistency. The Global Variables policies allow for defining and reusing variable references across instances of Sentry. For example, you might have a staging, test, and production systems where the policies can utilize global variable references so that when you share Sentry configurations among these Sentry instances, the policies will simply utilize the global variable reference values and the policies can remain the same across promotions to different environments. The pattern match policies are where you can define regular expressions. These can then be used for intrusion detection, data leakage prevention, or obfuscating information by replacing pattern in data or logs. The WLAF policies are for web application firewall rules. That is the end of the Resources section. Under the IDP section are the intrusion detection prevention rules that you can define for various types of message failures and also sensor policies for detecting error scenarios such as virus scanning or payloads exceeding certain sizes. The IDP rules provide a number of different rules. Once defined, these can then be defined in IDP groups. IDP groups are then associated with content policies for activation. IDP rules can be scheduled under the IDP Schedules screen. The IDP Actions screen defines the type of action to take when an IDP rule criteria is triggered. These actions can be abort the connection, logging alerts, setting an SNMP trap, quarantining, or applying future access restrictions such as throttling. That is the end of the IDP section. Under the Access section are the policy settings for user identity and access control. Under the Runtime Access section is where we can user access control lists, host access control lists, and IP access control lists. The Admin Policies section is for configuring administrative access domains and roles to limit admins to read or write roles to define what the allowable policies and menus the administrator can see. Under the User Policies section are the user-based policies. The User screen is for defining local users, and the User Groups is for grouping local users. The CAF screen shows any currently authenticated users that have an SSO session active. The LDAP policy screen enables connecting to any type of LDAP v3 compliance systems. This could be, for example, LDAP, Active Directory, or Azure Active Directory. The other policy types listed in this section allow connecting to user-based identity providers such as ORSA Secure ID, Kerberos, SiteMinder, WebSeal, Oracle Access Manager, WS Trust, Open Access Manager. There are also extensible policies for generic REST-based APIs, Sentry authentication for connecting to another Sentry instance, and an extensible authentication adapter called Custom that allows you to build any kind of custom authentication scheme. That is the end of the Access section. The System section is for system-wide settings and actions. Under the Settings section, the License screen allows for licensing Sentry either as an instance-based license or a floating license from a license server. The System screen is for settings, such as support to use for the Web Administrative Interface, SSH settings for the command line interface, settings your own TLS certificate for the web admin, NTP time server settings, or configuring the message that appears on the login screen. The Control screen is for rebooting and shutting down the system. The Preferences screen is for setting preferences for the system, such as the login color or certain behaviors at a system-wide level. The Network screen is for configuring the network mode, such as one-port mode, which is the most common topology mode, which allows for communication on the LAN and WAN interfaces. In this area is where you can enable IPv6. Sentry supports both IPv4 and IPv6 simultaneously. The Utilities screen is for network diagnostic tools such as ping, traceroute, and other types of networking troubleshooting tools. The Configuration section is where you find screens for configuration management. The Export screen is for exporting system configurations. The Import screen is for importing configurations or importing Bootstrap networking information. The Compare screen is for comparing configurations to see what may have changed before you actually perform the import operation. The Backup screen enables you to schedule backups, allowing Sentry to back itself up and store the backup file to those locations. The Agent settings offer global device management and allow you to define managed instances or agents of Sentry where you can push configurations out to Sentry agents via secure policy transfer. The Upgrade screen is for upgrading Sentry. This is where you would obtain the upgrades from Forum systems and apply them to your instance. The REST API screen is for enabling a REST API for provisioning Sentry policies through an API. The Portal API is used to communicate with the API Developer Portal. The Overview screen allows you to view of all of the policies configured on the system. These policies can then be selected for export. That is the end of the Systems section. The Partners section is for antivirus integrations. The CLAM AV screen is for the built-in antivirus. The ICAP screen is for configuring ICAP AV. On the Web Admin interface up here on the right-hand side, you'll see information about your current system, such as the system name, if you defined it, the user logged in, your IP address, and the current Sentry version that is loaded on the system. That concludes the walkthrough of the Forum Sentry Web Administration interface. Please refer to our documentation and help desk for more information on how to provision the Sentry policies.